born 1 minute ago. Monique names Tyler Perry, Oprah and Diddy in explosive federal testimony. The sixth day of proceedings in the federal case against Sean Diddy Combs opened under a fog of anticipation. Reporters packed the gallery. Rumors swirled, but no one expected the name that would define the day's events. Monique. Not just a celebrity witness, an industry disruptor with nothing left to lose. As she entered through the side door, the room shifted. Diddy's defense team exchanged alarmed whispers. The prosecutors sat up straighter. A few jurors stiffened in their seats. Combs' eyes narrowed, leaned in toward his attorney, tension etched in his jaw. The actress known as much for her Academy Award as for her long public feud with the Hollywood elite walked to the stand, calm, direct. "I was asked here to speak the truth. That's what I intend to do." And with that, Hollywood's darkest back channels began to unravel. She started with a timeline meticulously prepared and admitted into evidence with the court's permission. Names, dates, receipts, not just hearsay. Allegations backed by records, transcriptions, and her own lived experience. Monique wasn't repeating tabloid claims. She was building a case. Then she spoke a name that had not yet echoed in the trial, the Tyler Perry. According to her testimony, Perry admitted during a 2018 phone call that her blackballing had been unfair. He promised to correct it publicly. That apology never came. He told me if he apologized, it would expose people who weren't ready to be seen. She stated, locking eyes with the jury. He said, "Puff, that's who he was worried about." The courtroom recoiled. What had seemed like private drama now hinted at coordinated silence, powerful figures allegedly conspiring to protect one another, and Diddy specifically. Perry, she claimed, had even warned her, "There are things going on at Puff's parties I can't be connected to publicly." A transcript of that call was entered into evidence. The audio for now remained sealed. Then came a chilling recollection. In 2006, Monique said she attended one of Diddy's private gatherings in the Hollywood Hills. She described it as ritualistic, not celebratory. Phones were confiscated at the door, candlelight, music. Guests, some barely clothed, escorted to back rooms. An assistant allegedly told her, "It's about the experience here. You're safe. If you sign the NDA," she didn't sign. She left. After that night, Monique claimed her career began to erode. Roles disappeared, invitations ceased. She was told she was difficult. When asked if what she saw felt orchestrated, she didn't hesitate. "Yes, it was a system. When I didn't go along with it, I was cut off." Her testimony mirrored the accounts of others, Cassie Ventura, among them descriptions of staged intimacy, covert cameras, and an illusion of luxury masking coercion. But unlike many, Monique walked in on equal footing and walked out. That made her dangerous? Then she turned her attention back to Perry. She recalled a viral moment, Perry donating $1 million to Bishop T.D. Jakes' church. The audience clapped. Monique saw something else. That wasn't a blessing. That was a transaction, she testified. That money wasn't just for God. It was for silence. The timing, she noted, aligned with the sudden disappearance of online chatter about Diddy. Soon after, Perry and Diddy appeared together at a public event, smiling for the cameras. They weren't protecting each other, she said. They were protecting the machine. Monique then addressed the judge directly. "I'm not afraid of being blackballed anymore. Silence costs too much." She reached into her bag and pulled out a printed transcript. "This is the call, the one where Tyler Perry admits he was wrong." Gasps broke across the courtroom. In the transcript, Perry reportedly says, "You were never difficult. You just didn't want to work for free. I should have said that publicly, but then I can't go public. Puff's name is wrapped up in too much right now." Prosecutors use this to underscore how silence among Hollywood elites may have enabled abuse. Monique's story now aligned with earlier hints from others, including Diddy's former bodyguard and actor Christian Keys. This wasn't just about a man. It was about an institution. Her voice cracked only once. "He had the chance to clear my name," she said. "He didn't. Because he was protecting something bigger than me." The judge ruled the transcript admissible, a monumental win for the prosecution. Diddy's legal team looked visibly shaken. Then another name emerged, Oprah Winfrey. Monique testified that she once confided in Oprah about childhood abuse. "She told me she'd never use that against me," Monique said. "Then she put my abuser on her show. Right after I declined the Precious Press tour." The room fell into stunned silence. That wasn't just a segment. That was a warning. She claimed Oprah, Perry, and Diddy shared PR handlers, crisis managers, and legal teams. She said she'd received an accidental email, her name in the subject line, along with theirs. A discussion, she said, on managing public optics. That email, redacted, was submitted to the court. Monique's closing statement was less of a conclusion than a declaration. This system doesn't protect art. It protects power. It protects secrets. And if you break the silence, they'll take everything from you, your work, your peace, your voice. She paused. But they didn't take me. As court reconvened following a short recess, Monique did what few anticipated. She calmly shifted gears. What had already shaken the courtroom now escalated into something larger, an industry-wide indictment, cloaked in coded names and whispered rumors. "There's a list in Hollywood," she said, standing still, her voice even. "It's not written down. But everyone knows it exists. This so-called list, according to Monique, wasn't just a blacklist, it was a don't touch registry, the kind you couldn't cross without consequences. It's the list of people you don't criticize, you don't expose, you don't challenge, not unless you're ready to disappear." She paused just long enough for her words to sink in. Puff was on that list. Tyler was on that list. And Oprah. She helped write it. Gasps echoed across the room. Jurors scribbled furiously. Monique wasn't alleging a criminal conspiracy, she was outlining a cultural code of silence. She explained that once a person crossed an invisible boundary, refused to play, along declined a favor, rejected silence, they were marked. You'd be called difficult, crazy, dangerous. That happened to her in 2010, after the precious fallout after she refused to campaign for free. She named names not as an accusation, but as evidence. "Have you ever wondered," she asked, "how so many actors with one hit project, one breakout moment just vanish?" It wasn't coincidence. Some, she said, refused to play the game. Some saw too much. Some, like her, said no. And then she dropped another weight. She read aloud a statement, anonymous, redacted, and pre-approved by the court, describing a retreat hosted by a powerful male filmmaker. No phones. NDAs signed, rituals witnessed. She didn't say the name. She didn't have to. The judge interrupted, reminding the jury these were allegations. But no one missed the subtext. The prosecution asked if Monique believed Diddy played a role in the sabotage of her career. She didn't waver. Not at first, she said, but eventually yes. She recounted a conversation with a former Revolt TV junior executive, Diddy's own media company. He told me, "You rubbed the wrong people. It's not just Tyler and Oprah. Puff doesn't like noise." What followed was even more alarming. Monique alleged that around the time Perry and Diddy began discussing joint ventures, she became the obstacle. "I wasn't talent. I was a problem." She learned about closed-door meetings through third parties. Her name, she said, came up not as a casting option, but as a reputation risk. Then prosecutors submitted digital evidence emails between a PR firm representing both Revolt and Tyler Perry Studios. The topic managing narratives around both Monique and Cassie Ventura. For the first time, the court saw a direct communication link suggesting that two women's reputations were being curated, possibly undermined in tandem. Monique called it deliberate, strategic. They used that word difficult like it's contagious. Say it once in a meeting and suddenly nobody will touch you. And then she said something that cut deeper than any document. "I wasn't blackballed," she declared. "I was whiteballed by black people, people who looked like me, people who feared losing their own power more than they cared about doing what was right." The courtroom went still. "I didn't want to be here," she continued, "but I needed to be. Because what happened to me, what happened to Cassie, what's happening to people now, it's not over. Not unless someone says it louder than them." She described how, just 2 months prior, she refused the prosecution's initial request to testify. "I didn't want to relive it. I didn't want to open those wounds again." But then she said she saw the video of Prince being shouted at by Diddy in court. She saw Cassie break down. And she remembered what her grandmother once told her, "Baby, don't let them write your story without you in the room." That was the moment she decided to testify. The prosecution's final question cut to the heart of her message. "In your opinion, Ms. Jackson, what is the root cause of all this silence?" Monique looked across the room. "Fear," she said. "Everyone in this industry is scared. Scared of losing deals, scared of losing power, scared of being next." She turned toward Diddy. "You built an empire strong enough to silence everyone. But now you're sitting in silence. I hope you finally hear us." Her statement landed like a final verdict. Diddy, according to court observers, looked visibly shaken. His hands trembled. His attorney leaned in, speaking in hushed tones. The gallery, still frozen, felt something shift. Monique, once dismissed, had just taken control of the courtroom. She wasn't just telling her truth. She was rewriting the narrative. When court resumed the next morning, anticipation buzzed in the air like static before a storm. The previous day had ended with Monique's direct confrontation of silence, power, and betrayal. But what came next made it all feel like prelude. She returned to the witness stand no longer just a surprise guest, but the central figure around whom the trial now revolved. "I'm ready to talk about the audio," she said plainly. The courtroom stirred. Even the judge paused. The defense objected preemptively, sensing what was coming, but the prosecution was already armed with a foundation prior acknowledgement of the call, a submitted transcript, and now a legal motion to authenticate the recording. This wasn't gossip anymore. It was evidence. What followed wasn't the audio itself, it remained sealed pending forensic verification, but Monique described its contents with measured precision. "It's a phone call," she explained, "between me and Tyler Perry. He admits everything, that I wasn't difficult, that he should have said something. But he says he can't because it would blow back on Puff. That's his exact phrase." Gasps rippled. Jurors looked at one another. For the first time, the defense showed signs of panic. And then Monique delivered another seismic shift. "I have more than that call," she said. "I have logs. I have messages from producers saying they were discouraged from casting me. I have names." She held up a folder she'd brought the day before, but hadn't opened. The defense immediately objected, calling it theatrical. The judge asked her to hand over the folder. Monique complied without hesitation. Inside were phone logs, email threads, and calendar screenshots, all pointing to a network of behind-the-scenes decisions that collectively made her disappear from Hollywood's spotlight. One document stood out. An internal studio email, dated 2011 from a VP to an executive producer referencing a verbal red flag tied to Monique's name. It read, "Let's avoid complications." Word is, TP wants her iced. The courtroom gasped again. TP, the prosecution suggested, was Tyler Perry. Monique nodded. "It wasn't a blacklist. It was a whisper campaign," she said. "No memo needed, just a few calls, just a few people with pull." She paused, looking toward the jury. "Once they plant that seed, it grows everywhere. You don't get callbacks. You don't get invitations. You become a ghost in rooms you used to own." The prosecution asked how she found out about the audio being in danger of suppression. "I was warned," she said, "by someone who used to work with Perry's legal team. They told me the moment I started talking, they'd come for my credibility, not my truth and my image." She described it as the second form of silencing. Not overt, more insidious. They don't sue. They leak stories. They spread doubt. They rewrite you in the press until you're unrecognizable. Then came a revelation that shifted the courtroom's focus again. Monique claimed she had audio from a third party, not just Perry, where two studio reps discussed tying up loose ends involving her and another actress. She declined to say the other woman's name in open court, citing her safety. But the implication was devastating. There wasn't just one case of silence enforcement. There was a system complete with strategy sessions, communications consultants, and crisis teams. "You think NDAs are just legal tools?" she asked. "Their currency, their insurance, their weapons." She described how they're used not just to prevent lawsuits, but to prevent solidarity. One person breaks silence, they isolate her. Two, they erase them both. The prosecution asked if she believed these tactics were limited to Diddy's circle. Monique laughed, not out of humor, but bitterness. "This isn't about one man. It's about what happens when men like him have the full force of Hollywood machinery behind them." She leaned forward. "And I'm not just talking about men." The air turned leaden. She revisited her experience with Oprah, framing it now, not just as a personal betrayal, but part of a larger pattern. They don't need to hurt you themselves. They just have to let the system do it for them. That's when she made another startling disclosure. She said she had received what she believed to be an indirect threat. "A month before this trial, someone sent me a gift. No card. Just a box. Inside was a single envelope." She held it up. Inside was a photo of her from 2009, backstage at a comedy club. Scribbled across the back, "Careful who you speak about. Some legacies don't survive rewrites." The courtroom sat in stunned silence. The prosecution requested that the envelope be examined. The judge nodded, clearly disturbed. This wasn't just testimony anymore. It was war. And Monique had come prepared to fight it on record. By the time Part 4 of the trial unfolded, the courtroom no longer resembled a typical legal proceeding. The case against Sean Diddy Combs had evolved into a full-scale autopsy of Hollywood's inner machinery, its rituals, its alliances, and its silencers. Monique, unflinching, began to dismantle the myth that individual power in entertainment operates in isolation. "People keep asking how Diddy stayed untouchable for so long," she said. "The answer is simple, because the industry wanted him to." She detailed the way control moved, not through overt threats, but through structured complicity. Publicists, attorneys, talent agents, studio heads, all with something to lose if a figure like Combs fell. Everyone had their role: the assistant who made the NDA packets, the journalist who killed the story, the church that blessed the donations. She called it the pyramid. At the top were names: Puff, Tyler, Oprah. Names too valuable to challenge, too connected to unravel without consequences for everyone beneath them. She referred to them as the untouchables. And she wasn't done naming names. Another shift came when the prosecution introduced communications between a major entertainment law firm and a consulting agency responsible for managing sensitive image transitions. These documents referenced damage control scenarios tied to specific public figures, Diddy among them. One of the scenarios was titled simply MF Protocol. When asked what that meant, Monique spoke without blinking. "That's me. MF Monique Freakout. That's what they called it internally. The room recoiled. She explained that after her outburst over the Precious Press tour, a crisis team was allegedly deployed, not to fix the situation, but to frame it. They didn't care if I was hurt. They cared that I was loud. So they called it a freakout and spun it. One document showed a bullet point plan, position subject as erratic. Amplify past emotional footage. Leak unreasonable demand story. Avoid direct confrontation, use third-party sources. The courtroom sat frozen. This was image assassination, not PR. Then came what many described as the most damning exhibit of the day, a digital marketing schedule showing planned social media placements designed to influence public sentiment. Hashtags, talking points, influencer endorsements. They don't just control what gets seen. Monique said, they control how it's interpreted. The prosecution presented additional evidence, a payment record from a Diddy-affiliated brand to a celebrity blogger shortly after a negative article about Monique went live. It wasn't large, just under $8,000. But the timing was surgical, the implication influence disguised as advertising. And this wasn't limited to Monique. She testified that she had spoken privately with two other performers' names withheld by the court who described similar tactics. It's a playbook, she said, and it's bigger than me. She recounted a time when a casting director told her off the record that her name was on a caution list, not banned, not blacklisted, but flagged. That's how they do it. Quiet, professional, legal. You don't get fired. You just stop existing. The jury looked shaken. Even the judge seemed less composed. Monique took a deep breath and said something that would echo across social media within minutes. They made me a case study in silence, but I turned it into a case study in survival. She described how she kept every document, every message, every slight, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. I knew someday they'd act like it never happened, and I needed proof it did. The prosecution leaned into this moment. They asked whether she believed Diddy directly orchestrated the image campaigns. No, she said. He didn't need to. He had the machine. All he had to do was benefit from it. The court recessed, but the world outside did not. News anchors scrambled to dissect the documents. Former colleagues offered cryptic tweets. Some deleted old photos with Diddy. Others posted vague messages about accountability. One trending headline said, "At best, Monique didn't just speak, she named the playbook." By the final stretch of Monique's testimony, the courtroom had shifted into something deeper than a legal battleground. It had become a confessional space where the myths of power were being stripped bare. And what came next silenced even the most jaded observers. "I know who was at the parties," she said. "I know which NDAs were enforced. I saw the documents. I watched people sign them in front of me. There was no dramatics, no raised voice, only clarity. Each word landed like a blow." She recounted the language often used in those rooms. "You're lucky to be here. Be grateful. This is how the game works." She said these weren't just warnings, they were conditioning. "They told me, you talk too much." So they made sure I had no one to talk to. Then she played her final card. "I have audio," she said again. A different one. Not from Tyler, from a man within Combs' circle, someone she wouldn't yet name publicly. The audio allegedly features him describing in chilling detail the purpose behind the infamous parties, the roles of the assistants, and how reputations were managed afterward. The judge, after consultation, allowed the defense a private preview. When they returned from chambers, Diddy's legal team looked pale. The court moved to seal the tape for verification. But the room had already heard enough. Monique had laid out a blueprint not just of her fall, but of how fame, fear, and silence are engineered. Then came the final pivot. She turned not toward Diddy, but toward the jury. "I want you to understand something," she said. "This isn't about bitterness. This isn't revenge. This is what happens when you survive something you're never supposed to talk about." Her voice faltered once, but she didn't stop. "They told me I was hard to work with because I said no, because I asked to be paid fairly, because I wouldn't pretend things were fine." She scanned the room slowly. "Well, I'm not pretending anymore." The prosecutor's final question was quiet. "What do you hope comes from your testimony?" Monique paused. "I hope the next woman who says no won't lose everything. I hope the next man who sees something says it out loud. And I hope Puff finally understands that silence is not protection anymore." Her final words hit with the weight of a decade-long exile, reclaimed, "I am not the one who should be ashamed." And with that, she stepped down. Diddy didn't look at her. His attorney was already flipping pages searching for something, anything that could undo the damage. But the damage was done. Outside the courtroom, headlines surged. A wave of reconsideration spread across Hollywood. Old interviews resurfaced. Former collaborators distanced themselves. Social medias exploded. Within hours, artists posted cryptic statements. Podcasts dissected her testimony line by line. Even celebrities who had long avoided the conversation weighed in. In the public eye, a shift had occurred. No longer just a story about a fallen mogul. This was a rupture in the foundation of an industry long protected by gatekeepers. And at the center stood Monique, not broken, not forgotten, but heard. For the first time, not just by the internet, but by the people who built the silence she refused to live in.